Hi, I'm Ashy, and this is Crafty with Ashy, where I just try to inspire you to express yourself through your creative outlet. For me, that's painting, crocheting, and baking. Today we're going to be talking about crocheting, and we're going to look at which crochet stitch takes the least amount of yarn. So last week, I did a video on which stitch uses the most amount of yarn. So if you're interested in that one, you can check out that video here. But today we're going to talk about which one uses the least amount of yarn. So I came up with just a couple reasons that you might want to know this information. And the first one I think is probably the most obvious. You are trying to be frugal. You're trying just to not use as much yarn for completing a project, right? So you're wanting to stretch that yarn farther. Another reason, kind of along the same lines, is you found just a yarn that you absolutely love, but it's super expensive, so you don't want to have to buy very many skeins of that yarn, but you do want to make a whole project out of it. The third reason that I came up with was just that if you are using up yarn that you have left over and you don't have a lot of that yarn, you're going to want to stretch it farther so that you don't run out before you're done with your project, right? So those are the only reasons I could come up with. I'm not sure why this was hard for me to come up with reasons, but if you have any other reasons that you can think of why you would want the least amount of yarn in your project, let me know in the comments below. Because sometimes I get in my own head and then I get lost. And we all do that sometimes, so don't lie. But yeah, so let me know in the comments. For this experiment, I went ahead and crocheted swatches. They're 4x4 swatches of each of these stitches. And then I frogged them and measured the yarn. So I don't have those swatches to physically show you right now, but I do have pictures of them. I didn't do the filming while I was doing this, which I probably should have, but I didn't. So I did take pictures though, so you can see all of the swatches side by side. So I did kind of two different experiments here. I compared first the basic crochet stitches, and those ones are the single crochet, half double crochet, the double crochet, and the treble crochet. And you can see those swatches here. They're all 4x4 inch swatches, so they're all exactly the same size. I tried to keep the same tension, all of that. And then I did a separate experiment on the Lacy crochet stitches. I think it kind of goes without saying that the lace stitches are going to use less yarn than the basic kind of solid crochet stitches, right? You get a solid piece of fabric, whereas the lacy ones, you have holes in the fabric. By design, not because they ripped, but they have holes, right? So they're going to use less yarn. So I compared them separately. So for the results, right? Let's get into it. The basic crochet stitches. My experiment showed that the double crochet stitch and the treble crochet stitch actually used the exact same amount of yarn. And they both used less than the other two stitches. So they used 17.5% less yarn than the half double crochet. Nope, 17.5% yarn, less yarn than the single crochet. Sorry about that. So the single crochet used the most, and then the half double crochet used the next, and the double and treble use 6% less than the half double. So if you're looking at these stitches, right, and I'm not going to go super deep into this, but basically the single crochet stitch has the most overlap relatively with the previous row. So you insert your hook into the top of each of these stitches. There's a little bit of overlap to create the fabric, right? And then there's height. And the single crochet has relatively more overlap, and then progressively less overlap with each of the taller stitches. So in theory, you would think that the treble crochet should use a little bit less yarn than the double crochet, right? Because it's got the same amount of overlap, but then a little bit extra height. And for some reason, my project didn't show that, or my experiment didn't show that. And I think it really is just because the amount of difference is so negligible that you couldn't see it over this small of a swatch. It's so negligible. So maybe if you did like a king size blanket, you might see a slight difference, but again, the difference is going to be so negligible that it's not going to matter probably to your overall yarn usage. It's just not going to matter. So if you're looking to extend the size of your project with the least amount of yarn, the double and treble crochet are both great options. For the lace crochet stitches, the Solomon's knot used by far the least amount of yarn. So it used 23% less yarn than the filet crochet, and then 19% less than the trellis. So filet and trellis were pretty close to each other. And then Solomon's used a lot less than that. If you're looking for really extending that yarn and you like the Solomon's crochet stitch, because that's important, right? You want to make something you like, but it makes nice like light scarves and stuff. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If you like it, go ahead and use it, right? You'll extend your yarn a little bit more. You'll get more square yardage of a project out of the same amount of yarn. So now I don't want to throw a big wrench into it, but I do have like kind of one caveat. This was looking at both length and width, right? So we had squares. If you're looking at just getting the most length, so you're just making a long project and you don't care about how tall it is, the shorter stitches are actually going to use less yarn, right? So if you think about it, doing just a chain stitch, doing one really long chain is not going to use that much yarn compared to doing like a treble crochet, which is going to be real tall and long. So in that case, a chain is going to use the least, a slip stitch is going to use the next least, and then the single crochet. So if you're doing like one of those stash buster type projects where you're just doing rows of different colors of yarn, and you don't have very much of a certain yarn, doing a row of slip stitches or a row of single crochet is going to get you longer than doing a taller stitch. So that's my one little caveat. Don't mean to throw a wrench in it, but if you're looking for using the same yarn over the whole project, that's where my results come in. So I hope that you learned something from this today and that you can use this information in the future. And I just really appreciate you taking your time to watch this, and let me know if you have any other questions. I'll try to find the answers for you. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day.